I want to, I guess, get into a few more areas. One of them is your commitment starting in 2014 to the WBR Big Band out of Cologne, which is a very unique situation. There are a few in Europe like that, but can you, for the audience, explain how the WDR band is funded and what their schedule is? And because their level of playing is superb, and you've been the chief conductor there for it's almost 9 years now. Um, can you, explain that? And I guess the other question I have for you, sorry to lay this on you, do you think it's ever going to be possible to have such a band in the way that the WDR functions and is funded in this country?
Probably not.
Yeah.
I would like to think so, but yeah. Unfortunately, the arts is not held in high esteem here the way it is in Europe, although that could change over time. I think that, interestingly, the political slant of a particular country in great part determines the level of focus on arts and culture,
Sure.
and right now things are leaning in a way where, the arts are sort of being pushed down a little lower,
Yeah.
um, particularly when there's financial woes, you know, that's typically what happens.
Right.
Uh, but thankfully, some of the bands, the radio bands, radio television bands in Europe are healthy, and I think the populace sees the merit of these bands and enjoys the artistry and continues to support. So the way they work in Germany is that if you own a television or a radio, and now there's an internet component as well, you pay a nominal monthly fee, which I don't live there, so I'm not quite sure. I think it's, 20, 30 euro, something in that vicinity. And all that money goes into a fund, which then finances these musical ensembles. So in Cologne, Germany, where I work, there's this WDR Big Band. There are two orchestras. There's what's called the light orchestra, which does some of the sort of pop or crossover music, and then a symphonic orchestra. There's a choir. So and these are full-time positions, and there's a huge staff that works at the radio television. So it's interesting. I mean, this is sort of a nationalized arts scene that benefits not only the populace in terms of just exposure to great art, but also provides jobs for thousands of people.
Unbelievable.
And somehow in this country, that kind of thing is viewed as bad. It's socialism or something. Too
Yeah.
much control. But compare it to what happens here. What happens here is, yeah, there's a trickle of money that goes through the National Endowment of the Arts and so on. But the rest of it is all corporate money, which
Goes in
is
and out.
it's very hot and cold,
Right. Fluctuates
very,
constantly.
very politicized, rather than this sort of more equitable way of doing things over in Europe. So,
Yeah, it's
I mean,
strange.
there's your answer,
Yeah.
why it happens there and not here.
Right. But being there for this length of time, you know all the players. They are very familiar with your writing. What is their scene? What, I mean, it's like, is it a Monday through Friday scene, regular hours, and you have a certain amount of days of rehearsal before a concert on a consistent
Yeah.
basis?
Yeah. Basically, the productions we do at WDR, a week to 10 days, or sometimes 2 weeks if it's a more ambitious project. The rehearsal is generally like a 4 hour rehearsal slot. Um, there's some days are longer where they have a video team that comes in and documents what's going on.
Right.
And the recording takes place in the rehearsal room, so you have the ability to record as much or as little as you want. So for example, when we did soundscapes, I was there for 2 weeks almost. So, that was so luxurious to
Right.
my way of thinking, because if all those VMP records were done in 2 4-hour sessions, you know, first takes live to 2 track, most of them. So here you have the luxury of being able to try something, listen back, see maybe something is not quite working, or you just have an idea to try it a slightly different way. You have the time and you have the staff, and it's really a fantastic situation for somebody like myself, or composers, arrangers, somebody that
Right.
wants to generate, a recording out of a project.
Yeah, and I can't recommend more. I will feature this a little on the video, this latest album of Bob's Soundscapes. It's really magnificent. 10 tunes and different rhythmical vibe on each tune, and the soloists are great in addition to Bob's soloing. It's really tour de force, and it's wonderful to hear that it can be done in a way uh, that shows respect for the music, for the musicians, the band leaders, and hopefully one day, maybe, hopefully we'll be still around when it'll occur again in this country, or occur for the first time in this manner.
There are situations, here in this country that are commendable, that allow people to enjoy great art. I mean, I think of jazz at Lincoln Center, that they have, it's done kind of like a symphony orchestra.
Right.
They have a season, and they bring in a lot of people, a lot of interesting ideas. I mean, even the Yellow Jackets, which might not be considered, in keeping with what the Jazz at Lincoln Center Big Band does, they invited us to play there for 4 nights, in Rose Hall. So there's that. There's a Columbus Jazz Orchestra. Herb Alpert is involved at UCLA, and there's all sorts of great performances that go on there. Uh, you know, there's there's this group they're calling themselves the LA Jazz Orchestra, that's kind of developing out here. That's a big band, and so there are opportunities, and it really, unlike the government manipulation that creates these scenes here, it's more like individuals that take the initiative to go out, find funding to
Right.
create, an environment in which these things can happen.
Right.
And it is happening. It's just a different format.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, getting back to your own existence, how do you manage on a daily basis to deal with being a saxophonist, an improviser, ranger, composer, an educator, clinician? Uh, how do you, what is it? Is there a typical day for Bob Mintzer, and how would you describe that day for us? It seems hard to imagine anyone being able to cover all of these bases on such a high level on a consistent basis for all these decades.
Um, yeah, uh, you got to keep moving, number one. Number two, you need to walk slow. Very important. You know, if you, and I wasn't always able to do this, but you know, early on in my career, when I started to get busy, I would frequently become anxiety ridden. Like, how am I going to do all this? You know, I've talked to other arrangers too. You know, there's this project looming where you have to write 10 big band charts by X day. How on earth am I ever going to get this done? Well, you know, the first thing is you need to stay calm. You need to walk slow. You know, you need to be very deliberate in the way you spend your time, because frantically racing through a day generally yields very little. You know, because you're gonna falter, you're gonna fall down, you're gonna make mistakes. You're not going to be relaxed and thinking clearly. So, you know, for me, it has to do with, yeah, there's a lot going on. There's, you know, I mean, right now, right here, right now, I'm writing for a new Yellow Jackets project we're going to record in January. I have to do, I don't know how many charts for this Christmas project at the WDR. I have four different artists bugging me because I said I would play, you know, on their projects. And I'm teaching full time, and I'm traveling with the Yellow Jackets. So,
And you have a family.
and I have a wife. I think I still have a wife.
Caller's still around.
Carla's around. She deserves several medals. She's an angel to put up with my nonsense. But so, you know, it's a situation where, yeah, all this stuff is looming. So it'll get done. It always gets done, right? I mean, and to just try to stay calm and do a little at a time, basically, really, that's what it is, you know.
And
Well,
when you get to your horn, what is it that you, besides practicing the music that you're going to be responsible for, but as far as just the horn, the upkeep of the horn, maintenance with the horn, what do you do on a daily basis, let's say?
well, it's not done on a daily basis for one, because some days if I'm teaching all day, although I do bring my saxophone to school and I play because it's an opportunity to play, and I think it's good for the students to hear you practice what you preach. But you know, if I'm in a big writing crunch, there's no time to practice really. When I do, what I do practice for is um, a playing situation. You know, we're gonna do a recording with some guys out here, Peter Erskine and Alan Pasqua, Derek Oles, and myself. So everybody's contributing music. So you better believe I'm gonna look at all that and practice it, and you know, be ready to go in there. You know, I did some playing this summer with Dave Stryker's trio. We played at Birdland, and you know, I didn't want to get up there like reading music and stuff, so I memorized, you know, his book and shedded it so that I was ready to, you know, ready to hit.
Yeah.
So, but when I do have something, you know, I mean, I just played for a week with the Jacket, so I'm, you know, my chops are warm. But I have a short little warm up I do, just playing slow major arpeggios, you know, just getting that feeling back of connecting the notes, playing legato, playing with a nice sound, playing musically from bottom to top of horn, you know, and then it comes back pretty quickly. And thankfully, saxophone, at least the tenor, it doesn't involve brute strength or you know, a very small, minuscule manipulation like it does flute on flute, you know. But
Oh, man.
tenor is something I found I could pick up even after having not played for a couple of weeks, and you know, in short order, get everything back. The thing is, when I do a Yellow Jackets gig after having not played for a while, my face hurts because man, that's a lot of blowing, you
It's a,
know.
well, you're out front and you're playing a lot there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, it's funny. I remember Eddie Daniels telling me. He said, "You know, Ed, when I practice clarinet or flute, it's real work. When I'm playing the saxophone, it's just fun." And I think that's sort of a nice way to look at it, if you can.
yeah. Well, there's, I mean, technically, the tenor embouchure is looser it's more flexible. You're floating the pitch, right? You're not you could bite and go up. So it's a more relaxed thing here. I mean, you do need musculature, of course,
Sure.
to control that, but clarinet is like you're at the top of the pitch, basically, right? And there's this whole thing and this and then flute is
The
something
opposite.
else, just like
Right.
very small, focused airstream, and that can get distracted by any number of things.
Right, right, including
And
the
I'll never forget when I was in school of music. We're taking every gig that comes by, right? And so we'd look in the Village Voice. There'd be like, wanted flute player
right.
for
That's right.
$10 gig, right? It's
I
like
remember
great.
that. Yes.
So I show up and it's a rehearsal,
Yeah.
and this guy has this written line that goes way up into that third register, like pianissimo, right? Which is that's death by firing squad, right?
Right.
Immediately. And I'm not the greatest flute player at that juncture, and so I'm playing. I'm like going do 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 do, and the guy's conducting me, and he's going. Shh, okay, I'm like going. Hardly any sounds coming out at all, man. I wanted to commit suicide right then. It was just like, oh God, I'm
Yeah.
failing miserably, But it was a good lesson because and that's ultimately how I wound up with Katherine Hoover, because I needed some guidance in terms of embouchure and how to not blow too hard, how to focus that airstream, and she was wonderful in terms of describing what's involved in sound production on the
Right.
flute.
Yeah. Just as
Very
an
important.
aside to our listeners, Katherine Hoover was a magnificent composer. And she
Yes.
taught at Manhattan School for many years, but she was a wonderful composer, wrote a great amount for flute, clarinet, and chamber music, all instruments, really. And she was also a wonderful flutist, which people didn't realize later in her career because she was such an outstanding composer. And a lovely lady. Just a little aside. And for those who are a saxophone players, she wrote uh, really wonderful sax quartet many years ago, and the flute players know how many pieces. I think Cocapelli is a big seller, and but just one of those musicians who gets forgotten, unfortunately. But so
Yeah. And interestingly, she was one of, I want to say, four flute players I studied with, and she was really the one that nailed the whole embouchure thing. I mean, some great players and teachers, but they were very non-specific in terms of talking about this.
yes,
Whereas Katherine Hoover, she just nailed it right away and helped me immensely.
yeah. Well, there's a difference between a good coach and a teacher. And the
Mm,
teacher, I think, is the ultimate the person who not only can teach the music but teach the physics of playing an instrument as well. And
right.
I'm so glad that you had that chance with her, and vice versa for her. I'm sure she was loving that. Um,
Mm.
so, in wrapping this up a little bit, I was thinking about the fact that there are so many great big band arrangers who are trombone players, well known. However, in thinking about you, I realized there were many great saxophone players, not just who played it, but formidable jazz players who became great arrangers. I mean, from Benny Carter, Frank Foster, Frank West, Bill Holman, many albums, Jerry Mulligan, Al Cohen, Oliver Nelson. I mean, really great jazz players who were great arrangers. I mean, it seems unusual when I started thinking about it. These weren't just great arrangers, they were really formidable jazz improvisers, the gentleman I mentioned. What do you attribute? Do you think there's a direct correlation to being a wonderful jazz saxophone player, a jazz improviser, that translates well to the concept of big band arranging?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I know the answer, other than the fact that most saxophone players I know are very interested in playing piano. There's some great piano players, drums, and and I think being very attuned to the big picture, in any ensemble they play in. So that that keen interest in the big picture, I think, might facilitate being a formidable arranger. orchestrator, right? I mean, and also the fact that we, I mean, this is not exclusive to saxophone players, but we use this arranging ability to create an environment in which we like to play. And, you know, saxophone players, maybe because particular tenor players, you know, it's not so demanding to, you know, play that instrument compared to a trumpet, a brass instrument, or the flute, say. Um, we like to play, you know, we want to play a lot, you know. When did you ever hear of a saxophone player in a big band that didn't want to solo? Never. You know.
Yeah, unheard
So that, you know, maybe that carries over to, man, you know, if I write something for this band, you know, it'll create an environment in which I would enjoy playing. And in fact, when I was on the Buddy Rich band, I was the fourth tenor player, right? You know, Steve Marcus
right.
was kind of the featured tenor soloist, as he should have been. But when I started writing, I discovered very quickly if I write solos in the fourth tenor book, I would get to solo a lot. So for every, you know, so for every tune I wrote, I mean, I was writing for Buddy to, you know, give him something, feed him something that he enjoyed to play. But I was also thinking, how do I incorporate my playing into this setting, you know, and how do I play with him, and what should the backdrop be, and how do I use orchestration to create that? I'll never forget the first experience when I wrote my first big band arrangement for the Buddy Rich band. I had no idea what it was going to sound like. I mean, I had some idea of what I would hope it would sound like, but when I heard the band play this, I was so thrilled and so inspired to do more of that, that I ran and I wrote the next piece and the next and the next and the next.
Yeah.
And you know, to think of an ensemble as an instrument, you know, is maybe a way to look at this. I mean, you know, yeah, you play your instrument, but as a writer, that's another kind of instrument. You know, you can determine what this instrument plays from a distance, you know, or you could play along with this other instrument, you know, in a
Right.
particular way.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another way to look at it.
Yeah, and I imagine many of your students might follow in the same footsteps, at least at school, in trying to write for the bands there, as you sort of referenced earlier in the interview, which is so healthy and so practical because you, like I say, you never know what's going to pop up, and you got to earn a living. And being in music, in some respect, where you're playing an instrument or writing, is better than waiting on tables. Uh, you know, so it's great. Now,
Yeah, sure.
yeah, yeah,
I was just going to say, there's all different kinds of writing too, and you know, for me, it was just I was interested in music, right? So I found on these long plane rides to Europe, I would just start free associating. I'd write like a page of something I might improvise, just for fun. And then it occurred to me, maybe if I did a collection of these and put them in a book, people would enjoy playing them. It would be kind of a bit of a transcription situation where you did the work for the person.
Yeah, yeah, and just coincidentally, I have some of those books here, and his, we'll
Wow,
feature
who is that young guy? What happened to him?
one. Yeah, I bet this one.
Yeah.
And one that I've been playing as a result of scheduling this interview, I went back to the contemporary jazz etudes, and I must say, all of these books are wonderful. But uh, for players who might not have experienced it, writes beautifully in these. They're challenging rhythmically, harmonically, melodically, and you're given a great rhythm section to play with. Bob plays with the rhythm section, usually on these etudes first, and then you have a chance to play with it. And I found just practicing, I was playing a few hours this week, working on my tenor, trying to get my reeds together. And I found after a few hours that things started to come together in a way that I was not expecting. And I was actually kind of happy for once that, just being challenged by these etudes, playing with them, improvising against the chord changes you set forth. It was really wonderful. And certainly jazz pedagogy has advanced a great deal over the last 30, 40 years. And it's given us this opportunity. And the other thing that maybe is not mentioned enough, because with today's software and the way things are done, that it's still a good thing to really be a good sight reader. I think it's really an important trait of any musician. And these type of books that Bob has put out are all challenging. There's nothing, even the ones that are marked easier and all, there's good challenging reading there. And even for advanced players to come back and just try to sight read it and nail it first time through, it's not that easy. And I think it's important, not just from the sake of practicing with the rhythm sections you're improvising, which of course Jamie Ebersold created a whole uh, industry for that. I think it's important to be able to read weirdly well and figures and read odd meters and articulations and play it perfectly first time through. To really do that, that's a trait that I think the schools maybe aren't doing enough of today. And I think your books can really add to that for for any player. Like I said, I certainly was humbled by a few of those etudes this week. Just mentioning that since you referred to how you were writing, and that's something that I think you've really helped us with those books, Bob.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks, Ed. But like I said, I mean, the initial motivation was just enjoying music, writing these things out, and then kind of over time, the idea formed like, okay, so I put these in a book. Why not have a play along component?
Yes,
And for that matter, why not have like a page of theoretical chatter? Just like what are some of the devices I'm using in this particular etude?
right, right.
And like you say, I mean, there's sort of a multi-faceted aspect to these books. You can work on your reading, you can remove me playing the etude and blow, so you can work on your improvising using some of the techniques that I mentioned.
Yeah,
You could also listen to me play it, which might help just in terms of phrasing, inflection,
yeah,
sound,
interpretation. Yeah.
all those kinds of things. So
And
yeah,
also that usually one etude where you're just playing with the drums. And that's something that's wonderful to do. Even just maybe beginning your practicing like that, just
yeah,
just playing a little freer, and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
really a wonderful way to sort of make practicing interesting and fun. Um, and the last thing I want to talk about is your work as a clinician, because I experienced that when I ran a jazz program in New Jersey for a number of years, and you were a guest out there at least two or three times over that period of time. And it was very instructive for me to see how you worked with my student bands. Uh, and the bands got better over time, and you each time came out were a little bit more demanding, a little more incisive because the players were getting better, and the bands were getting better. But you're a very frequent clinician throughout the States, and I would hope so in Europe now that you're over there for some time. What do you, when you're hired to be a clinician, what is your thought process going in? Because that's something, everybody looks at slightly differently. But you've been an effective clinician. So, it seems to me you might have some more insight into really getting the best result in a short period of time.
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, I try to convey to students what the expectations are when you're called to play in an ensemble, to play a job. What's expected of you, how do you handle yourself. And so there's that. And I mean, frequently these students are not at a level where they are able to execute in that fashion. So now what? So then it becomes the question of how do you help these students to kind of get a little closer to being able to carry themselves that way, while being encouraging and not, discouraging.
That's a
Right?
hard, that's a very, it sounds easy to say that, but that's a hard nugget to nail. Uh,
Yeah, it is.
Because
So
I remember having you as a high school band clinician when we had a high school festival, and then working with college bands. So I mean, the levels were very disparate.
right. So
Uh,
the thing is, you need to know. I feel like I need to know as a clinician all the detail involved in the ensemble, meaning being articulate about what a drummer does, what a piano player does, what a bass player does, preferably hands-on. I mean, and in my case, I play a good deal of piano. I play drums. I have a drum set that I play,
yeah.
piano. And so if you arrive at a situation where the piano player is kind of getting in the way or not really helping or not supporting either the ensemble or the soloist, you need to be able to help them, to make suggestions as to what to do or what not to do. Same with the drummer. If you might tell the drummer, play the hi-hat a little more deliberately on 2 and 4 so that we can feel the time for you. Something as simple as that will change the whole sound and feel of a rhythm section. Or to work on the ride cymbal beat, or to work on the fills, to try to explain how the fills coincide with what the rest of the band is doing, so that there's kind of a hierarchy of elements in the music that fit together properly. So you need to be very articulate in how this all works. And then you need to be somebody who's patient, that can take a musician that's really struggling with the situation and explain for them what to do, and also be patient when it's not going to sound like the greatest playing ever.
Right, right.
So you try to be encouraging and make the most of it that you possibly can. But like I said, you have to be very specific, very articulate in the way you explain what these young players need to do to make it happen.
And
Something simple as horn players, if you can get them to accent their attacks in the name of having their entrances be a little more clear, concise, and energetic, just by way of moving a little more air through the instrument and starting with an accent, that could make a huge difference too, because a lot of times there's sort of a sponginess, to horn sections for that very reason. And then, the sustains is frequently too loud. So if you're playing a note really loud and sustaining, you're going to have trouble hearing what's going on around you. Whereas if you think sforzando piano, hit that note with an accent, come down in volume on the sustain, now you can hear a little more clearly what's going on around you. And that, something as simple as that, can really make for a much better blend in a student ensemble.
yeah, yeah, well said. And that it sounds simple, it sounds practical, it sounds common sense. but in the context of leading a band sometimes, and certainly, band directors all have good intentions, but to get it to the point where it becomes a musical statement is a real tour de force. And that, but like you said, when it happens, the students remember it, just like you remember your experiences at Interlochen and at Hart, and how much that was meaningful. So, it's hopefully something that music educators will pay more attention to, and also making sure that you bring out the right people as clinicians, not just the person who has the latest album out and, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had him, but someone who really has the depth in their music making and their writing that they can offer the students something in addition to what the music educator themselves can. uh,
Right.
and it really enhances the whole program that
Yeah.
way.
I
Uh,
would go a step, sorry, Ed, I would go a step further and say that, in terms of what I do, like with the WDR Big Band or my own big band, either in New York or LA, it's very critical, again, to be articulate, to be respectful, and to know how to talk about what you're thinking musically, what you would perhaps like to hear, but to be sensitive to the fact that you presumably hired great musicians. So you don't want to put them in a box. You don't want to say, I want you to do this exactly. You want to give them the leeway to express themselves and be a part of the music, while at the same time trying to convey sort of a general notion about how you're perceiving the music. But then there are instances where you have to relinquish that control and just go, okay, well, this drummer is hearing this music in a different way that I had initially intended, and I'm going to go with that, rather than cause a scene, or rather than say, I don't like that, do this. Sometimes, you said, I find I need to be open minded in a general way, and let the music go where it's going to go, and let the players that are involved contribute accordingly. It's really, really evident in the Yellow Jackets. Like, so there's no leader in that band. And when we bring a tune to the Yellow Jackets, we give it up. We give up control. It might be a swing tune when you hand it in, and it winds up being a polka in 7/4 by the time the guys get done with it. And that's the nature of the beast. But at the end of the day, I found it's always this input of the other players that make the thing come to life and turn into something magical, versus, there's this syndrome where you do a demo, say on Sibelius or Logic, and you really, it's called demo love, where you're married to, yeah, but my drum, the drum fill was this over here, I need you to do, it's like, you gotta relinquish the control and let the players you're playing with contribute the way they see fit, and it's a much happier, more fruitful, wonderful musical experience if you do that.
yeah, Brent, it just brought to mind one of the great stories that Frank Foster told me. He said when I think it was Neil Hefti brought in Little Darlin to the Basie band, it was a swing chart. Lee da ba do 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 dee. And
Right,
Basie's listening to it from the back, and he walks up. He
right.
said, "Let's try it this way. Lee boo do do do." And, and Neil Hefti said,
Bingo.
oh, he said, "Okay."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's an interesting way of going about not only music but even in life. As we get older, it sort of becomes apparent that's the way to go. um,
yeah,
final
yeah.
question, Bob. This is all for all the saxophone players. Uh, uh, let's talk about your equipment and how it's changed over the years. Saxophones, mouthpieces, and all, and your thoughts about that.
It's a big secret. I'm not telling you what I no. Like many saxophone players, I started out playing Selmer Mark 6. That was always the paradigm for all the players that I knew. And of course, the metal link, Coltrane played the 5-star. brass link mouthpiece, so we all tried to play those. I played on a link that Frank Wells in Chicago worked on when I was in the Buddy Rich
Oh,
band.
that's exactly who I was thinking about. He was such a magnificent, and he had so many stories about Coltrane bringing in mouthpieces.
Right, and Eric Dolphy too.
Right, they would just dump like a satchel of
Right,
mouthpieces,
right. Yeah,
all metal
I was
mouthpieces.
never, I was never one of those guys that played. I play one mouthpiece, and I would just stay with it. And so then, being friends with Mike Brecker, he started playing that sort of soft metal Dukov mouthpiece,
Right,
and so he had a couple, and I tried one, and I found that the links were a little more particular about reeds, and this Dukov had a little more brilliance and was a little more forgiving as far as reeds went. So I started playing that on a Mark VI. And then I was introduced to a man named Freddie Gregory through Bob Ackerman, who was in New Jersey.
right,
Freddie Gregory was of Russian descent. He had a shop in London, and he made fantastic mouthpieces. So I started playing one of his brass mouthpieces, and I actually played two of his brass mouthpieces, and then he made me an ebonite mouthpiece, or hard rubber, as we
right.
say. And I played that for a while, and I played that for a good long while, actually, on the Mark Sixes. Then I met again. I was playing this Mark Six. It was a gold-plated Mark Six, early 56,000, and then the Eastman Company kind of came to USC and wanted to meet me, and I tried a couple of their horns, and they were very good. And I wasn't quite ready to make the move yet, but I thought this is a good horn. I mean, of a new horn, I would say this is probably the best thing I had played. So I had a trip to Japan booked with the Jackets, and we had some air travel on a very unfriendly carry-on situation. So I brought the Eastman because I was afraid they would make me check my gold Selmer,
Right.
and I fell in love with the horn. I could hear myself better. It tuned better. I had a lot of unisons to play with Russ on the synthesizer, and I just enjoyed the sound of it and the feel of it. And that was 10, 11 years ago. And I've been playing the Eastmans ever since. So in the interim, I met Rafi Navarro, and he and I worked on a mouthpiece together, and we developed this bebop special. And it was basically a mimicry of this Freddie Gregory hard rubber I'd been playing. And so I played those for a while, and then I just pulled out my Freddie Gregory, and it felt like home. So that's what I've been playing the last couple of years.
So
But
you're selling the Mark Six, I assume.
I'm not selling anything. I learned a long time ago.
Yeah.
There's always regret, after the
Yes, it's
anyway.
true.
Um, so I've worked on a new Eastman 52nd Street tenor with the company. They're a fantastic company. They make great instruments, not only saxophones, but
Right.
they
Right.
partner with Bakun, great clarinets, bought Haynes Flute Company,
Right.
just rejuvenated that whole scene. Shire Brass, great guitars, great. They do everything right. And we spent 3 years uh, adjusting this 52nd Street. So it's a great horn. I mean, and I play it. I love it. That's the only thing I play. I've had a few colleagues buy one, and they're flipping out about it. It's just a wonderful instrument, and it's not expensive.
Right. And it's easy to acquire, at
Yeah, yeah, you
shops
get
around the
yeah,
country.
yeah, yeah. Now it is. I mean, they're flying off the shelf, this new model, but you can find them. It's a great horn, and it's half the price of the new Selmer tenors, and
Yeah.
I think twice the quality. Personal opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the Marks that Selmer has not returned to the level of Mark Six in quite a while. Uh,
No, and the thing about the Eastman 52nd Street that I like is it has got a little fuzzier core. It's not that pointed core like the six. So it has a little bit of the quality of the old Cons or Martins,
oh,
but
and
it's got
maybe,
all the key
yeah,
work of
maybe
a
even the super
Martin.
balances have
Yeah, yeah,
some
somewhat, yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
them.
But
Yeah.
there's a new key system that a flute maker designed.
Oh,
It's so amazingly comfortable. I can't
huh,
tell you. Yeah,
wow,
really excited about it.
great.
Yeah. So
Well, that's great news for all sax players, and because the prices of new horns today. I mean, I can't imagine a young player who wants to be a multiple woodwind player and getting
right,
all the saxophones, all the flutes, all the kind. I mean,
yeah,
you have to come in with several $100,000 willing to drop to
yeah,
acquire all these horns at the top prices
right.
they're asking today. It's really
Right.
unfortunate.
However, there are some really good instruments out there. This Eastman
Right.
52nd Street being one of them that are far less expensive. And I think there are flutes and clarinets as well
Yes.
that are, maybe not the top professional level, but very adequate.
Yeah, well,
For
even I've
double.
experienced even myself a change in the clarinets to it. I went to Yamaha a year and a half ago, and it's basically it sounds every bit as good as the buffets that I owned in the 1980s and so
Yeah,
forth. I mean, and they're much less
yeah,
than so, and a number of great players in New York like John Manassi and Eddie Daniels have switched
yeah,
also to that. So
yeah.
I mean, yes, there are alternatives now. It's just a matter of sort of being a little more open-minded
Right, 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 right.
and
So just
approaching
to
it.
Ed, I gotta run in a second, but
Okay.
just to finish our discussion, I'm playing so the Freddie Gregory mouthpiece. I'm playing this Eastman 800 series tenor and the 52nd Street soprano. Still have a Powell flute, but I use the Ishimori in Japan is a wonderful company. They make a great saxophone too, and I use their strap, their ligature, and their reeds, which are they call all those products woodstone,
Woodstone, right, right.
and the reeds are great. I use their strength four reeds, and I work on them a little bit, and they last a long time. The quality of the cane is excellent.
Yes.
So
Yeah, I've
that's what I've been
experienced
using.
some of the Ishimori. In fact, I use Ishimori ligatures on my clarinet, on my
Uh-huh.
saxophones as well. Yeah,
Yeah, they're
it,
very good.
it absolutely. It's a very good time for experimenting with equipment if one wants to go that
Yeah.
route. There's a lot of and being able to get them online. You don't have to just as we used to go down to 48th Street, uh,
Right.
and
Charlie Ponty.
when there were stores and deal with that. Now you can really get them in a few days, and it's a wonderful
Yeah,
option.
yeah.
But,
Remember Charlie Ponty, right?
oh, of course, I used to
I used to,
go
I
down
used to
there on
go in there.
Saturdays.
I buy blanks like clarinet. Studying with Cal Opperman. He got me making my own reeds from
Oh my
blanks.
God, yeah,
So I
right.
go in there and I pick out the blanks, the ones with the golden color. And Charlie Ponty, this old geezer, he'd come and look over my shoulder and go, "Kid, they're all good. Now you're wasting your time." I got one last story for you.
Okay.
I bought in Charlie Ponty's, there was a showcase with a tenor saxophone, and there was a sign. It said Coleman Hawkins tenor.
I know that. I remember that.
Yeah. So, all
Yes.
right. So I go in there, and at the time, I had a perfectly adequate Mark Six, but we were all playing beat up old looking Mark Sixes, with no lacquer on there.
Right.
So, and that was one of these horns. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
tried, I liked it, I bought it. Right.
yeah.
2 weeks later, I go back in there to get some reeds, and there's the showcase with another tenor. It's a
Coleman
Coleman
Hawkins.
Hawkins tenor.
Bob, you're not going to believe this. I went in there once. I was trying necks on my tenor, and he said, "Here, this is Coleman Hawkins." I bought the neck, and guess what? It always played flat because I realized it was extra long, and I kept thinking for years, man, Coleman, how did Coleman Hawkins place, with that extra long neck? Maybe he
Right.
pushed the mouth, but that's the way this guy ran his business.
Yeah,
But
of
it was a haven for woodwind players. We should
course. Yeah, we
I
all
mean,
went.
we were lucky to have him there, but it was always funny. And
Yeah, yeah.
anyway, it's been great catching up again with you, Bob.
Yes, indeed.
And thanks again for the time and again all the great music you've given us throughout your career. And look forward to more of the same. And just keep doing what you're doing and stay in good health, man. Because
Thanks, Ed.
we're,
You
we're all,
too. Great to talk to you.
you bet, man.
Everybody else.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Bye
We'll
bye.
catch up again. All right, Bob. Thanks.